In this instructional video, we're going to look at the Economies of Scale tool. The aim of this tool is to look at the extent to which you achieve economies of scale or diseconomies of scale when you expand. The aim is to look at a business that's got an existing cost structure, then look at a partial budget approach to work out the extent by which the business achieves economies of scale by expanding through either purchasing or leasing more land, or the extent to which they may achieve diseconomies of scale. Now, obviously, one of those is a big advantage and the other is a disadvantage. Let's get into the tool to see how it works. So as with all the other tools, what you see on your screen is a series of cells broken into components or tables. In the top left, what we have is a list of the overhead cost structure. Then we go on to another list of overhead costs, and that's got to do with the expanded area. Then over on the right-hand side of the tool, we've got a few other bits and pieces which I'll talk you through. So I'm going to, in the interests of explaining this tool, I'm going to concertina these up so that we can better explain the components of the tool. Like the other tools, what we have is white cells, which are effectively outputs of the tools, and grey cells, which are inputs of the tools. The grey cells are where you enter information, and the white cells are output. So let's look at the detail of this tool. So I'm going to concertina this, get rid of this, and now we've got a component of the tool which we can talk to. So we start with our existing area, which in this case is 1600 hectares. And like all the other tools, there's a little descriptor that comes up to tell you what to do. Enter the effective area in hectares of the existing farm area in this cell. Then we go to the expansion. In this case, we're looking at a 200 hectare expansion. So this is the area of the expanded area. Now, the tool then asks for the overhead cost structure in the existing business. So in this case, we've got $12,000 of administration costs. And then there's a descriptor of exactly what's included in administration costs. We've then got depreciation, which again is $12,000. The tool gives a description of what depreciation is, but there is another tool that you can actually use in the Young Farmer Business Program suite of tools that you can actually look at to establish your depreciation level. Electricity and gas, fertiliser for pastures, and so on. So the idea is that you populate every one of these cells, and what's reported is the output of total enterprise expenses for your existing business. Now, next to that, you will see the outputs. These are not cells that you can enter information into, and that's because we're about to go through the components where we enter the information into these cells. So let's expand this down, and this shows what we see when we expand the tool. So now we've entered in the information from our existing business. Now we need to think about what happens on a partial budget basis, or what happens just over those additional 200 hectares. Now we're asking for the administration costs associated just with the 200 hectares. The electricity and gas, there's no electricity and gas, indicating there's probably no dwellings on there. The insurance, it increases by $1,000. Lime and gypsum, a slight increase in cost there of $4,000. Materials has increased by $1,000. Rates and rents by $12,000, which seems extreme given our existing rates and rents are $12,000. So let's pare that back and let's call it $1,200 is more like it. And now we've got repairs and maintenance, which is $6,000 relative to $45,000 in our existing business. The next cells we're going to enter is how much more work will our existing plant do? Now, what that does is drives, so this is a relative increase. If my plant works 500 hours and we put 5% here, we'd expect an extra 5% of hours relative to our existing hourly rate. So that's what that drives, and that drives the depreciation and fuel. Will you need to pay for the additional labour? In this case, required to conduct the work, the answer is no. Let's go on now to the rest of the tool out here. So this is where we can assist with the pasture fertiliser. So if you enter in your stocking rate on the additional area, then you enter in the fertiliser rate, in this case 0.8 of a kilo of phosphorus per DSE, your fertiliser cost, it's single super in this case, 8.8% phosphorus, $50 worth of application. All that does is sums up our fertiliser cost. Then if we put our travel cost, how far is this block relative to our existing? It's 30 kilometres away. We put our fuel costs, our fuel efficiency, our average speed, and now we've reported the additional fuel costs as a result of us taking on this additional block. Now we've got our days of labour. How many days of labour do we think? 75 days of labour. Our hourly rate on average is $35 per hour, and then we've got on costs of 21% relative to our existing. And then down here is another table which says what are our additional vehicles and plants. Let's put in that we've bought a Hilux, we've bought it for $30,000 second hand, we're going to own it for 10 years and it's going to be worth $5,000 out the other end. Let's say our repairs and maintenance for the year is $1,000. Let's say our registration is $750 and our insurance is $750. Now what that's done is reported our vehicle costs, additional vehicle costs, and our additional depreciation as a result on an annual basis of owning that vehicle. Okay, that's all the bits and pieces. Now let's go back to our economies of scale tool. What it's reported, all those bits that you've entered now populate these cells down here. And what you can see is we've got $411,000 in our existing business, $36,000 in our expanded business. So we've got $182 per hectare relative to $257 per hectare in our existing business. What that tells me is we get a marginal benefit of scale of $75. So if I go down here to the bottom part of the tool and just get rid of this for demonstration purposes, what you'll see is you've achieved economies of scale with this expansion. That's a benefit. For every additional hectare in this expansion, your operating profit will increase by $75 per hectare. Now, the alternative is, let's say you did have to pay for your labour because it's a big component. Let's have a look at what happens if you've got to pay for your labour. In this case, it's a diseconomies of scale. That's bad. For every additional hectare you've taken on, you've actually lost $52 per hectare. So that's a neat summary of how to use this expansion tool. Hopefully it'll drive some efficiencies in your business when you're looking to expand.